The first of the double-decker carriages was unveiled today. Premier Neville Wran, Transport Minister Barry Unsworth and State Rail Authority Chief David Hill were the first on board.
If people like it, you can see they like it now.
450 of these will go into service, the first arriving in 1987. The Tangara, Aboriginal for to go, will travel up to 130 kilometres per hour, sports a sleek new line with huge tinted front windscreens and will be much quieter. More importantly, the seats are comfortable and there's plenty of leg room. All carriages will be air-conditioned, and for security against vandalism and for safety, closed-circuit television systems will be installed to monitor passenger behaviour. The big bonus is that this new rail project will see employment for 840 people. Production will begin next year. Elizabeth Hayes, National 9 News.
The inner city. One of 8 schemes will be selected at a cost of up to $100 million.
Initially regarded by sceptics as a tourist gimmick for Darling Harbour, Public Works Minister Laurie Brereton today hailed the People Mover project as the transport system which will take Sydney into the 21st century. In Mr Brereton's words, the 8 submissions now being considered range from a whisper-quiet, state-of-the-art magnetic levitation monorail to an advanced light rail system. All but the light rail or modern tram would be elevated above street level, all capable of carrying 3,500 to 4,000 people an hour. Mr Brereton's broader vision provides for links with existing rail and bus systems. For example, the light rail proposal would link Darling Harbour with Circular Quay, the Rocks area and Central Railway Station. A monorail system would follow one of 2 inner-city routes, either along Pitt Street via Market Street and back down Bathurst Street, or via Market and Kent Streets on the western side of the city.
They are most exciting proposals, indeed I think the most exciting and innovative things to happen in Sydney for decades.
Mr Brereton says the People Mover will be self-funding, although exactly what it will cost the public is, at the moment, only guesswork.
Clearly it can't be too expensive, because that would not be good for the purpose of getting people into and out of this area. To be economically viable, it will need to have a reasonable usage fee.
As futuristic as the concept may be, consultation on what route the system will follow, as well as financial and environmental considerations, will begin immediately. It's yet another project the state government wants to see finished in time for the bicentenary in 1988. Brad Schmidt, National...
Crash tore a gaping hole through most of the carriages, but thanks to the early hour, there were few casualties. Only 5 people received minor injuries.
It was 5 o'clock this morning when the brakes jammed on a container wagon on a freight train heading down the Blue Mountains towards Sydney. That carriage jumped the tracks, its container smashing head-on into a speeding interurban express travelling towards Lithgow. The first carriage of the passenger train left the rails, hit a stanchion and careered up an embankment, stopping several metres short of a brand new house. The floor in the train was ripped out, seats smashed together as the container continued to gouge a gaping hole along the following carriages. Nurse Pam Morris ran from her home seconds after the collision.
There were about 5 guys standing around the driver and his crewman or whatever, and
the guards and that.
They said that they were all right, but one guy said that he knew of someone right down the end, and apparently, we went down there and he was hurt, had a bit of blood on him.
3 hours after this head-on collision, these seats, or rather what's left of them, would have been packed with early morning commuters heading down the Blue Mountains to Sydney. It's certain there would have been fatalities. There were, in fact, only 7 people on the train. 5 of them, including the driver, were injured, but only slightly. State Rail Authority Chief Executive David Hill inspected the wreckage shortly afterwards and conceded that matters could have been far worse.
I'd have to admit that we've been extremely fortunate.
The huge task of clearing the wreckage began almost immediately, a large crane being used to lift off the lead carriage. Buses ferried passengers around the collision, while the SRA plans to have normal electric services operating again by tomorrow morning's peak. Greg Granger, National 9 News.
While debate over the new Darling Harbour transport system rages, US correspondent Robert Penfold reports on a similar scheme in Seattle, which over the past 20 years has proved to be a great success.
The Seattle monorail was built for the World's Fair back in 1962. The plan was to demolish it once the show was over, but the people of Seattle grew to like their monorail, and it's still there today. These days, by far the biggest users of the monorail are sightseers. It runs from the old World's Fairgrounds right into the heart of the city. A short run of just 3 kilometres down past the office blocks and doctors' surgeries. Seattle's monorail is the old style. Heavy concrete stanchions, driver operated. Unlike this European-designed sleeker version planned for Sydney. George Benson, transport spokesman for the Seattle City Council, has been to Sydney. So does he think a monorail there might become a white elephant?
Ours didn't.
For years now, supporters of the monorail have been lobbying local organisations to extend the line to make it something a little bit more than a fun ride for tourists. But that money, and there'll need to be plenty of it, has never been voted through council.
Because the city paid the owners of the land along the right-of-way about $3.5 million in the year 1963 for their loss of light.
Any objections to the monorail here, for instance, it ruins the appearance of the city, have long since faded with time. In fact, it's now one of the tourist attractions. And for a city which has on average more than 200 wet days a year, Seattle needs all the help it can get. Robert Penfold, National 9 News, Seattle.
A 64-year-old viaduct supporting the Illawarra rail line is crumbling away. The viaduct over a steep gorge just south of Stanwell Park railway station may lead to the closure of the line on the eve of Illawarra's rail electrification launch.
Senior rail officials have kept the findings of the viaduct's deterioration very much to themselves until leaked to Win TV News late this afternoon. As our cameras show, there are serious cracks forming in the bridge, some measuring 12.5 centimetres apart. The cracks forming in the viaduct are worsening, and senior SRA engineers are very concerned and may be forced to close the section of the track. The problem is so serious, trains are being slowed to a crawl over the bridge and are only using one lane. The cracks were noticed in August and, according to an unofficial source, have been worsening. Teams of SRA engineers and civil bridge construction experts have been called in and are presently undertaking a study of the damage already sustained to the viaduct. Illawarra Rail Superintendent Len Oliver today said the rail overpass was 100% safe and that rail commuters had absolutely no need to worry over their safety when travelling on the South Coast line. Meanwhile, about 35 shunters from the Port Kembla goods yard are involved in a statewide stoppage which stems from the staffing of two-man crews on freight trains. The stoppage stems from a dispute at the Junee Rail Depot where shunters have been using two-way radios because of the shortage of their manning levels. Rail union officials have warned that the dispute could escalate and involve passenger trains throughout the state by the weekend.
But now it's all off. Damage has been discovered on a major railway viaduct at Stanwell Park. The electrification of the Illawarra line has cost $230 million over the past 4 years. A bevy of dignitaries have been lined up for Sunday, including Premier Neville Wran, Transport Minister Barry Unsworth and Rail Chief David Hill. Today, Mr Hill postponed the opening after inspecting the damage. The problem has been caused by a geological shift along the escarpment. Engineers say the line is still safe for a limited service and trains are running at a reduced speed. The grand opening of the completed project is now expected to go ahead in 2 to 3 weeks' time.
The State Rail Authority today scrapped plans to launch the $220 million electrification on the Illawarra rail line this weekend. Following last night's exclusive Win TV News report highlighting the structural damage of a rail viaduct on the Illawarra line, engineers today decided to stop electrification work immediately, with trains grinding to a halt on the line as from midnight.
The troublesome 64-year-old viaduct is located just south of Stanwell Park railway station. As highlighted in last night's Win TV News, this is what has staggered the State Rail Authority. Gaping cracks have formed on the bridge's eastern side, some measuring 7 centimetres wide. The western side of the viaduct also bears severe structural cracks, some running almost a quarter of the length of the bridge. brick framework has simply fallen away, plummeting 43 metres to the gully floor. Only one of the two rail lines over the bridge is able to be used, and even it features extremely severe buckling of the track. Already weight and speed restrictions have been imposed on trains using the Illawarra line. Today, SRA Chief Executive David Hill, flanked by senior engineers and civil bridge construction experts, made a special inspection of the troubled area, which has brought the $220 million project to a shuddering halt and stunned SRA officials. Following an inspection of the viaduct by Mr. Hill, all workers on the site were called together, and then came the shock news. Electrification was off.
I didn't want you blokes to hear it second hand. You pulled out all stops for us. You've done truly a magnificent bloody job. Nobody believed you could finish electrification before the end of this year, and you've done it. And I just feel a bit weak that on all the engineering advice, the proper course for us to take is to cease operations and fix the viaduct, and it means, regrettably, we'll have to postpone electrification for this Sunday.
After the shock announcement had been made, it was revealed that geographical movement was the cause of the viaduct crumbling.
The viaduct at the moment, according to our engineers, is still safe. But there are geological forces here in the gully that are putting pressure on the structure, and while it's safe at the moment, they're saying it's quite possible that there are going to be further geological shifts that will make it eventually unsafe. And the view of our engineers, and I've accepted that, and the Premier's accepted it, is that we should postpone electrification, and we'll get the commuters home tonight, but probably from tomorrow we'll shut down the viaduct while we'll undertake the restructuring and the repairs.
As our report goes to air, SRA officials have arranged for a bridge construction expert from British Rail to fly to Australia to inspect the site. Today's announcement has put the opening of electrification back until February, possibly longer if a new bridge must be built.
We've just been decked by what can only be described as really bad luck. I feel sorrier, I think, for the fellows that have been working on this project now for literally years and chasing a very tough deadline than I do for anybody. And of course, commuters in Wollongong who have waited very, very patiently with pretty antiquated services for this magnificent electrification, I think we've got to feel a bit sad for them too.
As a result of today's Illawarra rail closure, all freight trains have now been diverted down the steep Mossvale line. The line has already been the subject of numerous disputes over its safety. Colin Duffy filed this report from the Illawarra Rail headquarters only a short time ago.
Well, as you're well aware by now, there certainly are a lot of problems facing the Illawarra rail line and the administrators of the SRA. At the moment, the freight line on the Illawarra line is closed. That means all freight will now be using the Mossvale line. There's just been a meeting between the union and district rail officials over the problems on the Mossvale line. Dale, at this stage, what is the latest?
The latest is that there's a committee being formed to meet on Monday to discuss the heavy traffic that's going to be run over the Mossvale line. We have problems with the increase of traffic, more than the 3 trains we run over there today, and there's some concern of the union with the length and the weights of the trains they want to run.
At this stage, serious problems in the Illawarra?
Yes, there could be a few serious problems if the SRA doesn't agree to some of the terms that we've put forward.
The good news is that all the celebrations organised for this weekend's Electrofest will go ahead as planned. Organisers are treating the delay as a temporary setback only. They say the completion of the electrification is the real cause for celebration. Tomorrow night, the Win Nightly News will bring you a full rundown of the weekend's events. They start tomorrow afternoon with a children's party in McCabe Park.
Today was supposed to be the big day, but on Thursday the Stanwell Park Viaduct was declared unsafe and closed. There weren't supposed to be any electrics until after the official opening.
Port Kembla train stopping Coniston, Port Kembla. Port Kembla train stopping Coniston, Port Kembla.
But obviously electric operation, at least with single deckers locally, is in full swing.
Narrowly escaped injury when a train collided with their car on a level crossing at Fairy Meadow.
At the time of the accident, there were claims that there were no signals operating on the crossing to indicate a train was approaching. The boom gates were out of service because of electrification work, but there was supposed to be flagmen on duty and flashing lights to give a warning to motorists. One of the victims of the crash, Mr. Aiken Oziena, said when he approached the crossing, everything appeared to be normal and he began inching across. And by the time he saw the northbound train, it was too late. He also said when he was being rescued from his car, an SRA employee told him station staff hadn't realised a train was due at the crossing. Although an inquiry into the accident was started immediately, the findings have only just been released. 6 SRA employees were found to be neglectful in their duty, which contributed to the accident, and penalties have been imposed, ranging from fines to reductions in grade. In his report on the accident, SRA Chief Executive David Hill said for over 130 years the railways have had an impressive safety record, and he was greatly concerned this accident had occurred. A full report has been forwarded to Transport Minister Barry Unsworth.
Commemorate the 25th anniversary of the tram's demise.
The final tram, packed with well-wishers, left Hunter Street right on 3 o'clock. At the controls, Wally Heil, who's now returning to Sydney for the anniversary, and conductor Frank Ratcliffe, squashed amongst the passengers, who's yet to be located. Next month's Open Day is designed to make up for the apparent lack of recognition shown by authorities at that time for the tram's near century of service.
They were the only city in the world that refused to have any sort of celebration for the closure of their system.
All 30 of the museum's trams will be on display, maintained by volunteers who remember when working on the trams was a prestigious job, admired by the whole community.
In fact, on one occasion, I recall at Ultimo Depot, a driver turned up for work one day and he never had a tie on and his shoes were untidy, so they sent him home.
Ironically, when transport planners scrapped Sydney's trams 25 years ago as an obsolete form of transport, they had no idea that in 1986 we'd be seriously considering another type of tramway, the monorail. Work on the new system is due to start soon, but in the hearts of tram enthusiasts will never replace the old tramways. Kay Brown for 7 National News.
Doing geological movement, the bridge has been subjected to further stress since it was closed. SRA engineers have decided to rebuild an entire section of the 64-year-old viaduct. The damaged number 6 arch has been entirely removed and is being replaced with a steel section. The new steel structure is designed to accommodate further geological movement, providing adequate stability and strength. The Illawarra line was closed on December 12th, postponing the introduction of the $200 million electrification work. SRA executives have declined to release the cost of the repairs, which is expected to run into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Since the closure of the bridge, buses have transported passengers between Waterfall and Wollongong, while freight trains have used the Mossvale line. The SRA intends to launch electrified services to Wollongong immediately after the repairs are completed.
After cracks were noticed in its structure, just prior to the launch of electrification.
This morning, a fully laden coal train weighing 3,300 tonnes was used to test the stability of the bridge. After slowly rolling onto the rail viaduct, surveymen spent almost an hour measuring the bridge to check for possible movement. According to SRA engineers, the 64-year-old viaduct passed today's test with flying colours. The bridge was closed to rail traffic on December the 12th when large cracks were noticed in its structure. SRA engineers blame geological movement in the escarpment for the cracks. Since closing the viaduct, the 6th arch of the bridge, which suffered the most damage, has been replaced with a new steel structure. In addition, all of the other 7 spans have been strengthened by the insertion of tension rods. A system of steel supports has also been included to strengthen brickwork. SRA engineers claim the work has been designed to accommodate further geological movement while providing the bridge with stability and strength. It's understood work on the viaduct has cost the government $1.5 million. However, SRA administrators refuse to comment on the figure. New South Wales Premier Neville Wran will repeat his mid-December actions and officially declare the electrification open when he travels on the first electric train from Sydney to Wollongong tomorrow. Electric passenger rail services will begin from midnight tomorrow. The SRA says both lines over the viaduct will be open with no weight restrictions for freight trains. However, speed restrictions will be imposed until new tracks over the viaducts settle down.
Port Kembla has taken 4 years and cost more than $200 million. As a result, it now takes just 90 minutes by train between Sydney and Wollongong. Mr Rand, who flew in, predicted that the new line would open the Sydney job market to the people of Wollongong.
And particularly the young people and the women of Wollongong who have found it hard in recent years to get jobs in this region.
Electrification of the Sydney to Newcastle line led to a massive 70% increase in patronage. The SRA is looking for a similar result between Wollongong and Sydney.
This will allow us, I believe, to provide a commuter service between the cities of Wollongong and Sydney, second to none in the world.
Judging by the throng which turned out to welcome the electric train, the people of Wollongong are pretty pleased that at last they'll be able to travel in comfort.
Trains. Going by the number of travellers and their positive comments, Mr Oliver believes the SRA plan to create awareness of electrification has been a success.
It was proposed on the 15th of December, the original opening, that we would allow electric train travel free within the district once the official opening was undertaken, and that was a disappointment to many, many people in the area. And Mr Hill has agreed to, and did so, to create that awareness for the residents of Illawarra to see their railway.
The first train arrived in Wollongong from Sydney at 8:25 a.m. yesterday, and from then on the flow of visitors didn't stop until the last train left at 7:10 p.m. Just so visitors had the chance to see more of the Illawarra, they were allowed to alight at Thirroul and Corrimal if the northern suburbs interested them more than Wollongong. For those who came to the city with a few questions about what to do and see, the Leisure Coast Tourist Association was well prepared and answered more than 2,000 inquiries.
We worked in close liaison with the Leisure Coast Tourist Association, Mr Ian King, and he arranged, in consultation with the local bus company, and there was a special bus run from Wollongong Station up to Mount Kira Lookout to allow Sydney people the opportunity of looking at that area, and also they undertook the galleries and the various areas in
Of collecting fares. Among the changes, sophisticated automatic vending machines replacing ticket windows.
To some, it may not sound as so much of a surprise, but the present system of rail ticketing hasn't changed for 100 years. You go to a counter, ask for one of hundreds of different tickets and pay your money. And provided the station attendant at the other end doesn't look too closely, it's possible to cheat. The new system will change all of that, streamlining the number of tickets available, which will be bought from soon-to-be-installed vending machines. Weekly tickets will also be available through the machines, and they'll accept credit cards. The new automatic system will simplify rail travel and make it quicker leaving the station, because you won't be required to show tickets at the turnstiles. You can just walk straight through. It's based on honesty, but there'll be many more inspectors. SRA Chief David Hill says it'll mean the end of long queues and dramatically cut $10 million worth of cheating every year.
The number of cheats in the system aren't held in check so much by the normal barrier staff, but more by special blitzes by railway ticket police, and under this proposal you're going to see more of that, not less.
The new passenger-operated vending machines will be installed throughout the Sydney, Wollongong and Newcastle systems. The railways guarantee there'll be no loss of jobs during the changeover, so provided there are no hitches with the unions, full automation should start taking place within the next couple of months. John Mangos, National 9 News.
And those wistful to hear the clang of the bell once more. The drivers, the conductors and the inspectors who provided the legends of the tramway system are now in other occupations. But their old love has been poured into keeping these trams in peak condition. Michelle and Stephen Deans came today to ride the beauties their great-grandparents used to drive. It was a summer afternoon in February 1961 when a convoy of 3 corridor trams left the Hunter Street terminus for La Perouse. The trams were farewelled in style. Today, traffic manager of the museum, Peter Kahn, joined his colleagues in remembering that journey.
A lot of sadness, a lot of gaiety, friendship and so forth. It was sad for a lot of the men to see the trams go.
At 2:48, the magic time of that journey, a parade of the museum's trams rolled out in memory. The museum is to be shortly relocated from its present site near the gateway to the Royal National Park to near Loftus Railway Station. They hope for a full kilometre of track, subject of course to the generosity of enthusiasts.
No rails, so number 1995 travelled on the back of a semi-trailer through the city to La Perouse, retracing its last journey in 1961. It had been left to deteriorate until recently restored to its former glory. In days gone by, it wasn't putting your feet on the seats, but another bad habit, which attracted a tough penalty.